All right, what differences did you notice between the reading in the Bible and the History Channel's adaptation of the Bible? Here's kind of the notes of what I had. And first was that this battle was multiple days in the 17th chapter of First Book of Samuel. And that David, during those days, is coming and going from battle. Now, in the History Channel's version, when David is walking towards Goliath, he's whispering Psalm 23 to himself, which is often attributed to David, at least in the Christian tradition, but it's not said during this battle. So one of the tasks of adapting any book into a movie, especially anything as big as the Bible, is you're going to have to take some parts and kind of mix them together. And so this isn't necessarily biblically accurate, but I think it is a smart place to put Psalm 23 in this version of the Bible. In the History Channel's version, you hear someone say wolves in shepherd's clothing, which wasn't from that part of the Bible, but was based off a Jesus quote from the Gospel according to Matthew, which doesn't even come into the New Testament. So we're taking a story that really is Jewish in tradition and kind of imposing or adding on, projecting some Christian scripture onto it. In the biblical account, Saul didn't know who David was until after he killed Goliath, where in the History Channel version, it seems like he knew him from the beginning. That clip also doesn't mention David knowing about a reward for killing Goliath, so it kind of changes how you see David. It's much more, I'm doing this for Israel, which you could be doing that in the Bible, but you don't get any of the sense of this external reward and the power and glory that's going to come with killing Goliath. Also in the History Channel version, you don't see a shield bearer with Goliath. And there's less of a kung fu standoff at the fight in the biblical version. And there's some different dialogue, different actions. If you go back, you can see they're not really just standing there talking smack to each other, but there's some running involved. And so what? Do these changes amount to kind of what any person adapting a book is going to do, or do they change the story? Do they change how you worship it? Do they change how you see the story? Maybe a little. But what we're going to do is we're going to take it a little bit further and not change the details, but change how some people see and interpret those details, and not ask you to believe in anything, but ask you to analyze the argument that's about to come forward. And so, as we said at the beginning of the class, many Americans love the underdog story, and Malcolm Gladwell wants to challenge the assumption that David and Goliath qualify as kind of the ultimate underdog story. Not to refute the story's existence, like I said, not to change any of the details from the biblical account, but to use the Bible to craft an argument that many of us are kind of interpreting this story wrong in Gladwell's sense. And so in Schoology, you're going to read the chapter from Malcolm Gladwell, or you could watch the TED Talk. I highly recommend the TED Talk, but some of you prefer to kind of get this information through reading. You're, of course, open to read the chapter and watch the TED Talk, whichever is going to help you. And then after you do that, you're going to write something based off this prompt. So you're going to situate yourself at the start and describe your previous knowledge, if you had any knowledge of David and Goliath, like where did you learn it from, what did you think of it. Then you're going to dive into the analysis of Gladwell's work. Now this reflection shouldn't explain whether you agree with Gladwell's claims, but rather detail how he builds the argument. Don't try to refute the argument, don't try to say he's right. I mean, you can say a little bit of it, but really what you're focusing on is how does Gladwell make his argument? Right, so if you want to tear apart someone's argument, first you need to understand what exactly is the argument they're making. Or if you want to replicate and tell people about someone's argument, you want to know exactly how are they making that argument. So please focus your analysis on how Gladwell uses an example or two in his chapter or TED Talk to strengthen the logic of his argument. So it's expected that you're using exact quotes from two sources, either Gladwell's chapter or his TED Talk, and the 17th chapter of the first book of Samuel. And so while you're watching or reading, make sure you're just taking some notes for what exact quotes you can use in your response to this prompt. Again, this has nothing to do with whether you agree or disagree with Gladwell. We'll probably have a mix of that in the class, but it's all about analyzing Gladwell's arguments based on his research and the first book of Samuel. And so if you're going to do it kind of in a super formulaic way, you're going to say Malcolm Gladwell claimed this, this, and this. Part of his evidence was when blah, 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 da, da, and that's what you get from the first book of Samuel. And then Gladwell built off of that by right? So if if the argument is Malcolm Gladwell claimed that David and Goliath is actually the first true love story, part of his evidence is when Goliath tells David how much he misses him from the first book of Samuel, and Gladwell built off of that by explaining how missing someone is one of the key steps to love. Now, don't copy off of that, because all of that is absolute nonsense. Like, none of that is coming from the source material. But I didn't want to steal anyone's thunder and take away one of the things people could use in their papers. So that's what you're doing for that assignment. Then for your homework, or if you finish this assignment early, it's about learning about 3 of the covenants with God as described in the Hebrew Bible. We're talking a lot about David today, so you're going to learn a little bit about the covenant with Noah, Abraham, and Moses. And so you have your 2 assignments, your prompt for David and Goliath, your prompt for the covenants with God. And I'll see you on Tuesday, and good luck getting this all done. Just email me if you have any questions, and I'll see you soon.